3 words from my husband saved my entire family from federal prison. Turn around now. That's all he said. But those 3 words exposed the most twisted betrayal I've ever experienced. And I'm about to tell you exactly how my own parents tried to destroy my life using my children as cover. My name is Hallie. And what happened to me 3 years ago will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty. By the end of this story, you'll understand why I believe some family members are more dangerous than strangers, and why sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones planning your destruction. But first, let me take you back to that Saturday morning in October when my world exploded. We were loading our SUV for what I thought was a simple family trip to Toronto. My husband Jake was checking the tire pressure for the 3rd time, because that's what he does before every road trip. Our 3 kids were bouncing around the driveway, excited about seeing their cousins at my niece Rachel's wedding. Emma, our 8-year-old, was already planning all the games she wanted to play with her cousin Sarah. Tommy, our 6-year-old, was more interested in the hotel pool than the wedding. And Madison, our 12-year-old, was doing that preteen thing where she pretended she was too cool to be excited but kept checking her suitcase to make sure she packed the right outfit. It was supposed to be boring. Beautifully, perfectly boring. Just a 3-hour drive north, a weekend of small talk with relatives, bad wedding cake, and kids running around in fancy clothes they'd spill something on within 5 minutes. I was actually looking forward to the mundane normalcy of it all, especially after the drama we'd been dealing with my family lately. See, about 8 months before this trip, I had done something that apparently marked me as the family villain. I said no to my parents. Now, before you think that sounds dramatic, let me explain the twisted dynamic I grew up in. My parents, Linda and Robert Mitchell, were masters of emotional manipulation disguised as family love. They had this incredible ability to make every crisis in their lives somehow become my responsibility to fix. Growing up, I was the responsible daughter, while my younger sister Jessica was the free spirit. Jessica could blow through 3 jobs in 6 months, max out her credit cards on shopping sprees, and show up to family dinners drunk, and my parents would just smile and say she was finding herself. But if I forgot to call them back within 24 hours, I was selfish and ungrateful. This pattern followed us into adulthood. Jessica would have some crisis, lost job, broken relationship, financial emergency, and somehow I'd get a phone call asking if I could help out just this once. Boy. And I always did, because saying no meant being lectured about family obligations and blood being thicker than water. The breaking point came when Jessica's teenage son Dylan started having problems at school. He was getting bullied, his grades were slipping, and he was developing anxiety so severe that he was having panic attacks in class. Jessica and her husband Marcus decided the solution was to transfer him to this elite private academy that specialized in troubled teens. The school cost $45,000 a year. They needed $20,000 for the deposit, and they needed it within 10 days to secure Dylan's spot for the next semester. Of course, they didn't have $20,000. Jessica had blown through her inheritance from our grandmother on a failed business venture, and Marcus had been laid off from his construction job 2 months earlier. So they came to the family meeting with a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not kidding. They actually made slides explaining why this school was Dylan's only hope and why I was the only family member in a position to help. "Hallie makes good money," my mom said, like I wasn't sitting right there. "And she's always been so responsible with her finances. This is what family does for each other." $20,000. They wanted me to hand over $20,000 for a private school that might not even help Dylan, while I had 3 kids of my own to worry about, a mortgage, and college funds I was desperately trying to build. But here's the thing that really got to me. They didn't ask. They assumed. They sat there looking at me like my agreement was a foregone conclusion, like my money was their money, like I existed solely to solve their problems. For the first time in my adult life, I looked my parents in the eye and said, "No, I can't do this. I won't do this." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that living room. My dad's face went through about 6 different expressions before settling on cold fury. My mom started crying. Not sad crying, but angry, manipulative crying designed to make me feel guilty. "I can't believe you're abandoning your nephew," Jessica said, her voice shaking with rage. "He's family. Hallie, how can you be so heartless?" "We're not asking you to pay for a vacation," my dad added. "This is Dylan's future. This is his mental health. And you're saying no because what? You want to keep your money for yourself?" I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked toward the door. "My answer is no," I said. "Figure out another way." They didn't speak to me for 2 months, 2 blissful, drama-free months where my phone didn't ring with crisis calls, where I didn't have to navigate family guilt trips, where I could just live my life without being anyone's emotional ATM. Then, about 3 weeks before Rachel's wedding, they called like nothing had happened. Suddenly, they were chatty and warm and excited about the family reunion. They'd worked things out with Dylan's school situation. Don't worry about it. They'd found scholarships and payment plans. Everything was wonderful. They couldn't wait to see us in Toronto. I was so relieved that the Cold War was over that I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to rock the boat. I just wanted us to be a normal family again, even though deep down I knew we'd never been normal to begin with. So when my dad showed up at our house that Saturday morning, carrying a navy blue duffel bag I'd never seen before, I didn't think twice about it. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, giving me one of his bear hugs that always smelled like coffee and aftershave. "Beautiful day for a drive, isn't it?" "Perfect weather," I agreed, watching Jake wrestle with Tommy's car seat straps. "Are you and Mom all packed?" "That's actually why I'm here," Dad said, hefting the duffel bag higher on his shoulder. "Our car is absolutely stuffed to the brim. We've got wedding gifts. Mom's contributed 3 different dishes to the reception, plus all our luggage. I was hoping you might have room in that big SUV of yours for 1 extra bag." The bag looked heavier than it should have for clothes, but I figured it was packed with wedding gifts, or maybe some of Mom's famous casseroles that she always brought to family gatherings. "Of course," I said, taking the bag from him. "No problem at all." As I loaded it into the back of our SUV, wedging it between our suitcases and the kids' backpacks, Dad stood there watching me with this strange expression on his face. If I had to describe it now, I'd say he looked like someone who was trying very hard to appear casual while internally celebrating a major victory. "Thanks, Hallie," he said. "You're a real lifesaver. We'll see you up there." He hugged me again, waved goodbye to Jake and the kids, and practically skipped back to his car. I remember thinking it was nice to see him so happy and relaxed. For once, he seemed genuinely content, like all the family drama was behind us. I had no idea I was looking at a man who thought he'd just executed the perfect crime. The drive started like every other family road trip in the history of family road trips. Kids arguing over music, bathroom stops every 30 minutes, Jake obsessing over gas mileage and traffic patterns. We played 20 questions, listened to an audiobook about a dog who solves mysteries, and stopped at a rest area so Tommy could run around and burn off some energy. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. The kids were being relatively well behaved. Jake was in a good mood, and I was actually starting to relax and enjoy the idea of a weekend away from our regular routine. We were about 90 minutes into the drive, cruising along Interstate 90 through the beautiful upstate New York countryside, when Jake suddenly went rigid beside me. I felt the change in his energy before I even looked at him. It was like someone had just whispered terrible news in his ear. "Turn around," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Turn the car around right now." I glanced over at him, expecting to see him grinning or giving me some indication that he was pulling my leg. But his face was dead serious, paler than I'd ever seen it, staring straight ahead like he'd just seen a ghost. "What?" I laughed nervously. "Jake, what are you talking about?" "Hallie." His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it that made my blood run cold. "I need you to turn this car around right now. Don't ask questions. Just do it. Now let me tell you about my husband. Jake Rodriguez is the most level-headed, rational person I've ever met. He's the guy who stays calm during medical emergencies, who talks me off the ledge when I'm spiraling about something stupid, who handles every crisis with this zen-like composure that sometimes makes me want to shake him just to see if he'll react to something. Anything. In 17 years together, I'd seen Jake panic maybe 3 times, and every single time it was because one of our children was in immediate physical danger. So when Jake tells you to do something in that tone of voice, you don't question it. You just do it. The next exit was about half a mile ahead, exit 42, leading to some tiny town I'd never heard of. I took it without saying another word, my heart starting to pound for reasons I couldn't name yet. The exit ramp curved sharply to the right, taking us away from the interstate and into what felt like a completely different world. "Are we stopping for gas?" Madison asked from the back seat, looking up from her phone with mild curiosity. "Just need to check something," I said automatically, using that fake cheerful mom voice that probably fooled nobody. I pulled into the parking lot of what appeared to be an abandoned farm equipment store, the kind of place that probably closed down when Walmart came to town. Jake was already unbuckling his seatbelt before I'd even put the car in park. "Stay here," he said to all of us. "Everyone just stay in the car for a minute." He got out and walked around to the back of the SUV, moving with this deliberate calmness that was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been running around screaming. I watched him in the rearview mirror as he opened the tailgate and started carefully moving our luggage around. That's when he found my dad's duffel bag. He stared at it for a long moment, his shoulders tense, his head tilted, like he was listening for something. Then he closed the tailgate and walked back to my side of the car, his face grim in a way that made my mouth go completely dry. "I need you to come look at something," he said quietly, tapping on my window. "Why? What's wrong? Jake, you're scaring me." "Just come with me, please." I looked back at the kids, who were all watching us with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. Tommy was still absorbed in his coloring book, but Emma and Madison were definitely picking up on the weird adult energy happening in the front seat. You three stay right here, okay? We'll be right back. Madison, you're in charge. I followed Jake to the back of the car, my legs feeling unsteady for reasons I couldn't explain. He opened the tailgate again and pointed to the navy duffel bag sitting there among our family's innocent vacation luggage. Open it, he said. Jake, what's going on? Why won't you tell me what's wrong? Hallie. His voice was gentle but firm. I need you to open that bag. My hands were shaking as I unzipped the duffel bag. At first, all I saw were clothes, a couple of sweaters, some jeans, a pair of sneakers, normal travel stuff. But there was something about the way everything was packed that felt wrong, too careful, too deliberate. Jake reached past me and moved one of the sweaters aside, and that's when my entire world collapsed. Underneath the innocent-looking clothes were multiple vacuum-sealed packages, clear plastic bags filled with white powder. More than I'd ever seen outside of a movie or TV show. Each package was carefully wrapped and sealed, with little labels covered in numbers and symbols that meant nothing to me, but probably meant everything to someone else. There had to be at least 3 pounds of it, maybe more. Enough to destroy lives, enough to send someone to federal prison for decades, enough to take my children away from me forever. I couldn't breathe, literally could not get air into my lungs. I stumbled backward from the car, my hand flying to my mouth, and just stared at what my parents had done to us. Oh my God, I whispered. Oh my God, Jake. What is this? What did they do to us? He carefully moved the clothes back over the packages and zipped the bag closed, his movements precise and controlled, like he was defusing a bomb. Your parents, he said quietly, looking me straight in the eye, just tried to turn us into drug mules. The words hit me like a physical blow. Drug mules. My parents had put drugs in our car, with my children in the back seat. We were 90 minutes away from the Canadian border, where drug-sniffing dogs and federal agents would have found this stash in about 30 seconds. I thought about the border crossing we'd done dozens of times before, how they sometimes pulled cars aside for random searches, how they asked questions about what you were bringing into the country. I thought about my 3 children sitting in that back seat right now, coloring and playing games and completely oblivious to the fact that their grandparents had just tried to destroy their entire future. How did you know? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring at the closed bag like it might explode. This morning, when your dad brought the bag over, he said finally. Something about the way he was acting, too casual, too cheerful, like he was trying really hard to seem normal. And then when you took the bag, I saw this look in his eyes, like he'd just won something. He shook his head, running his hands through his hair. I couldn't stop thinking about it the whole drive. It kept nagging at me. Your parents have been acting weird ever since that fight about Dylan's school. Then suddenly they're all happy and friendly again, wanting us to take this mysterious bag to Canada. It felt wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. I turned around and looked at our SUV, where my 3 children were sitting innocently in the back seat, probably wondering why Mommy and Daddy were taking so long. Madison was showing Tommy something on her phone. Emma was braiding her doll's hair. They looked so normal, so safe, so completely unaware that they were sitting 15 feet away from enough drugs to send their parents to prison for the rest of their lives. They used our children, I said, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. They put drugs in the same car as our children and sent us toward an international border. I know, Jake said softly. They were willing to let us go to prison. They were willing to let Emma and Tommy and Madison grow up without parents. I know. For money, I continued, my voice getting stronger as the rage started to build. They were willing to destroy our entire family for money. Jake nodded, and I could see the same fury burning in his eyes that I felt building in my chest. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the drugs. This was revenge. This was my parents punishing me for saying no to them, for setting a boundary, for refusing to be their personal ATM. They couldn't force me to give them $20,000 for Dylan's school. So they'd found another way to make money off me, even if it meant destroying me in the process. Standing in that abandoned parking lot, staring at enough drugs to destroy my family's entire future. I felt something I'd never experienced before. Pure, crystalline rage mixed with absolute terror. This wasn't just betrayal. This was attempted murder of everything I held dear, wrapped up in a navy blue duffel bag and delivered with a smile and a hug. "We have to get rid of this," I whispered to Jake, my voice shaking. "We have to get this out of our car right now." "I know," he said. But he was looking around the empty parking lot like he expected DEA agents to come bursting out of the abandoned farm equipment store. "But we can't just dump it here. If someone finds it, if there are cameras, if they trace it back to us somehow." He was right, and that terrified me even more. We were trapped. We couldn't keep driving with it. We couldn't throw it away. We couldn't take it back to my parents without essentially admitting we knew what it was. Every option felt like a path to prison. "Mommy, what's taking so long?" Emma's voice drifted from the car window, innocent and impatient. "Tommy says he has to go to the bathroom again." I looked at my 3 children sitting in that SUV, completely oblivious to the fact that their lives had just been put in mortal danger by their own grandparents. And something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped. Like a steel cable under too much tension. "Get back in the car," I told Jake, my voice steady for the first time since we'd made this horrible discovery. "We're taking this straight back to my parents' house." "Hallie, are you sure that's—" "They gave this to us." I interrupted, slamming the tailgate shut. "They can have it back." The drive back to Buffalo was the longest 2 hours of my life. Every police car we passed made my heart stop. Every time we had to slow down for construction or traffic, I was convinced we were about to be surrounded by federal agents. Jake kept glancing in the rearview mirror like he expected helicopters to start following us. But the worst part was listening to my children chatter innocently in the back seat, asking when we were going to get to Toronto, wondering if we'd still make it in time for the rehearsal dinner, completely unaware that their grandparents had just tried to use them as human shields in a drug trafficking operation. "Are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's house first?" Madison asked, as we took the exit toward my parents' neighborhood. "Yes, sweetheart," I managed to say without my voice cracking. "We need to return something to them." My parents lived in a modest 2-story colonial in a middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place where people mowed their lawns every Saturday and brought casseroles to new neighbors. It looked so normal, so innocent, so completely incompatible with what we'd just discovered hidden in their extra luggage. Their car was in the driveway, which meant they were home, probably getting ready for their own departure to Toronto. I wondered if they were planning to call us in a few hours, acting all worried about where we were, pretending to be concerned that we hadn't arrived yet. I parked in their driveway and turned off the engine. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was crystal clear in a way it hadn't been in years, maybe ever. "Stay in the car," I told the kids. "Mommy and Daddy need to talk to Grandma and Grandpa for a few minutes." "Can we come say hi?" Tommy asked. "Not this time, buddy. We'll be right back." Jake and I got out and walked to the back of the SUV. He opened the tailgate, and we both stared at the duffel bag sitting there like a live grenade. "What are you going to say to them?" he asked quietly. "The truth," I said, lifting the bag out of the car. "That we know exactly what they tried to do to us." The bag felt heavier now that I knew what was in it, like the weight of betrayal had actual mass. I carried it up the front steps and rang the doorbell. Jake right behind me. My mother answered the door wearing a cheerful yellow sundress and a bright smile that faltered the moment she saw us standing there with the duffel bag. "Hallie, Jake, what are you doing here? I thought you were driving to Toronto today." "We were," I said, holding up the bag. "Until we found this." Her face went through a series of micro-expressions: confusion, recognition, fear, and then a practiced innocence that might have fooled me 6 months ago but didn't have a chance of working now. "Found what, honey?" "It's just the extra bag we asked you to take." "Mom." I unzipped the bag right there on the front porch and folded back one of the sweaters, revealing just enough of the vacuum-sealed packages underneath to make my point. "We know what this is." The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Behind her, I heard my father's voice calling from the kitchen. "Linda, who's at the door?" "It's Hallie and Jake," she called back, her voice strangled. My father appeared in the hallway, took one look at our faces and the partially open duffel bag, and I watched him realize that their perfect plan had just collapsed. "You opened it," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact, delivered with more disappointment than surprise. "Jake's instincts saved us from becoming your unwitting accomplices," I said, stepping into their house uninvited and setting the bag down in their front hallway. "Did you think we wouldn't figure it out? Did you think we'd just walk across an international border carrying your drugs and never know what you'd done to us?" "Now hold on just a minute," Dad started, switching into defensive mode. "You don't understand the situation we're in, the kind of pressure we're under." "The pressure you're under?" I could feel my voice rising, and I didn't care. "You put drugs in the same car as your grandchildren. You sent us toward the Canadian border where drug dogs and federal agents could have found this and arrested us. You were willing to let Emma and Tommy and Madison watch their parents get dragged away in handcuffs. It wasn't supposed to happen that way," Mom said, tears starting to flow. "We had it all worked out. The route, the timing, the contact on the other side. It was supposed to be completely safe." "Safe?" Jake spoke for the first time since we'd arrived, his voice deadly quiet. "You think there's a safe way to turn your daughter and son-in-law into drug mules?" "We were desperate," Dad said, and I could see him switching tactics, going for sympathy now that denial hadn't worked. "After you refused to help with Dylan's school, we had to find another way. This was supposed to solve all our problems." "By creating bigger problems for us," I said. "By destroying our lives so you could fix yours." "It wouldn't have destroyed anything if you hadn't gone snooping around," Mom snapped, her tears drying up remarkably quickly. "If you'd just done what we asked and taken the bag to Toronto like normal people, everyone would have been fine." And there it was. The real truth. In their minds, this was still somehow my fault. I was the problem for discovering their plan, not them for hatching it in the first place. Get out, I said quietly. Huh? What? Mom looked genuinely confused. Get out of my life, both of you. This is over. We're done. Hallie, you don't mean that, Dad said, taking a step toward me. We're family. Family doesn't abandon each other over mistakes. Mistakes? I stared at him in disbelief. You think trying to turn us into drug mules was a mistake? You think putting my children in danger was just an oopsie? We would never have let anything happen to the kids, Mom said. They're our grandchildren. We love them. No, I said. And I felt something fundamental shift inside my chest, like a lock clicking into place. People who love children don't use them as cover for drug trafficking. People who love their daughters don't try to send them to federal prison. You don't love us? You use us. I turned toward the door, then paused and looked back at them one more time. Don't call us. Don't come to our house. Don't contact the children. We're done. You'll change your mind. Mom called after me as Jake and I walked back to our car. You always do. You'll cool off and realize we're still family. I didn't respond. I just got in the car, started the engine, and drove away. Where are we going now? Madison asked from the back seat as we pulled out of their driveway. Home, I said. We're going home. What about Toronto? What about the wedding? I looked at Jake, who nodded slightly. Change of plans, sweetheart. We're going to have our own family weekend instead. The kids were disappointed, but they got over it quickly when we promised them pizza for dinner and a movie marathon. Children are resilient that way. They adapt to new plans, new routines, new realities without dwelling on what might have been. If only adults were that flexible. That night, after the kids were asleep, Jake and I sat on our back porch and tried to process what had happened. The enormity of it kept hitting me in waves. My parents had been willing to destroy my family to save themselves. They had looked at my children, their own grandchildren, and decided those little lives were acceptable collateral damage in their scheme to make money. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't trusted your instincts, I said to Jake, if we'd made it to the border. Don't, he said, reaching over to take my hand. We didn't. That's what matters. But we almost did. We were 90 minutes away from crossing into Canada with 3 pounds of drugs in our car. Do you know what the mandatory minimum sentence is for that? Do you know what would have happened to Emma and Tommy and Madison? Jake squeezed my hand tighter. I know, but it didn't happen. We're safe. The kids are safe. Your parents showed us who they really are. And now we know. He was right. But it didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be the daughter they wanted, the reliable one, the responsible one, the one they could count on. And they had repaid that loyalty by trying to turn me into a criminal. 2 days later, they started calling. First my mom, then my dad, then both of them together on speakerphone. I didn't answer. They left voicemails at first, apologies mixed with justifications, promises that it would never happen again mixed with explanations about how desperate they'd been. When I didn't respond to the voicemails, they moved on to texts. Long, rambling messages about family forgiveness and second chances and how I was being too harsh, too unforgiving, too dramatic. When I blocked their numbers, they started showing up at the house. The first time, I opened the door just long enough to tell them they weren't welcome and that if they came back, I'd call the police. The second time, I didn't open the door at all. The third time, I did call the police. Ma'am, this is a civil matter. The officer explained patiently. They're your parents. Unless they're threatening you or damaging your property, we can't really do anything about them coming to your house. That's when I realized we needed a more permanent solution. We have to move, I told Jake that night. Not just across town, far enough away that they can't just show up whenever they want. Jake's company had been trying to transfer him to their Denver office for 2 years. The promotion came with a significant raise, full relocation expenses, and most importantly, 1,300 miles between us and my parents. Are you sure? Jake asked when I brought it up. That's a big change. New schools for the kids. Starting over completely. I'm sure, I said. I can't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering what they're planning next, protecting my children from their own grandparents. We need a fresh start. The move took 3 months to organize. 3 months of my parents escalating their attempts to contact us, to manipulate us back into their lives. They tried going through Jessica, who called me screaming about how I was tearing the family apart over a misunderstanding. They tried going through other relatives, painting themselves as the victims of my unreasonable anger. The most manipulative move came 2 weeks before we were scheduled to leave for Denver. They showed up at Emma's school during pickup time, with presents and big smiles, telling her they'd missed her so much and couldn't wait to spend time with her. Emma came running up to me, confused and excited. "Mommy, Grandma and Grandpa are here. They brought me a new doll." I saw them standing by their car, watching us with satisfied smiles, knowing they'd put me in an impossible position. I couldn't make a scene at the school without traumatizing Emma and causing gossip among the other parents. But I also couldn't let them think this kind of manipulation was going to work. I walked over to them, Emma skipping beside me, still clutching her new doll. "Give me the doll." "Emma," I said quietly. "But Grandma gave it to me," she protested. "I know, sweetheart, but we need to give it back." I handed the doll to my mother, who looked genuinely shocked. "Hallie, you can't be serious. It's just a present for our granddaughter." "A granddaughter you tried to use as cover for drug trafficking," I said, keeping my voice low but making sure they heard every word. "Stay away from my children. Stay away from their school. If I see you here again, I will get a restraining order." "You're being ridiculous," Dad said. "All this drama over one little mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," I said. "It was a choice. You chose to put drugs in my car. You chose to risk my children's future. You chose to treat us like disposable pawns in your scheme, and I'm choosing to protect my family from you." I took Emma's hand and walked back to my car, leaving them standing in the school parking lot with their rejected gift and their shocked expressions. That night, Emma asked me why I wouldn't let her keep the doll from Grandma and Grandpa. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her grandparents are dangerous? How do you tell a child that the people who are supposed to love and protect her were willing to destroy her family for money? "Sometimes adults make very bad choices," I told her, sitting on the edge of her bed. "And when that happens, we have to protect ourselves and the people we love, even if it makes other people sad or angry." "Did Grandma and Grandpa make bad choices?" she asked, her big brown eyes wide with confusion. "Yes, sweetheart, They did. Are they going to make good choices now? I looked at my daughter. So innocent, so trusting, so completely unaware of how close she'd come to losing everything, and I felt my heart break a little. I don't know, Emma, but that's not something you need to worry about. Daddy and I will always protect you, no matter what. Moving to Denver was like emerging from a fog I hadn't realized I'd been living in. The mountain air was clean and crisp. The pace of life was slower. And for the first time in years, I could answer my phone without anxiety because I knew it wouldn't be my parents calling with another crisis or manipulation. Jake's parents, Maria and Carlos, lived about 30 minutes away from our new house. They were everything my parents weren't. Genuinely kind, respectful of boundaries, interested in our lives without trying to control them. They babysat the kids without expecting payment or favors in return. They brought us home-cooked meals when we were sick without expecting us to owe them something. They loved us without conditions, without strings attached, without secret agendas. It was Maria who helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't normal family dysfunction. It was abuse. Mija, she said to me one afternoon while we watched the kids play in her backyard. What your parents did to you, trying to make you carry drugs, that's not just bad judgment. That's evil. They're not evil people, I said automatically, because even after everything, I still felt the need to defend them. They were just desperate and made a terrible decision. Maria shook her head. Evil people don't think they're evil. They always have reasons, justifications, excuses. But when someone is willing to destroy their own child to save themselves, that's not desperation. That's evil. Her words hit me like a physical blow because I realized she was right. Normal parents, even desperate ones, don't use their children as human shields. Normal parents sacrifice themselves to protect their kids, not the other way around. 6 months after we moved to Denver, I got a call from Jessica. My parents had been arrested again, this time for attempting to cross the Canadian border themselves with a trunk full of cocaine. No middlemen, no family scapegoats, no innocent grandchildren as cover. Just 2 people in their 60s who still thought rules were suggestions and consequences were things that happened to other people. They need help, Jessica said, her voice shaky with panic. They need money for lawyers. This is serious. Hallie, they could go to prison. Good, I said, and I meant it. How can you say that? They're our parents. They stopped being my parents the day they put drugs in my car with my children inside, I replied. They made their choice. Now they get to live with the consequences. Jessica hung up on me, but I didn't care. I felt nothing but relief that their criminal activities had finally caught up with them without dragging my family down too. They were each sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, 6 years to think about what they'd done, what they'd almost cost us, what they'd chosen over their daughter and grandchildren. I didn't visit them. I didn't write letters. I didn't send money for commissary or lawyers or phone calls. They had burned that bridge so thoroughly that there was nothing left but ash and the memory of betrayal. But here's what I want you to understand. Cutting them out of my life wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about protection. It was about recognizing that some people are too dangerous to love, too toxic to maintain relationships with, too destructive to allow near your children. I had spent 35 years trying to earn their love, trying to be the daughter they wanted, trying to fix their problems and manage their chaos. And in return, They had been willing to destroy me and my children to save themselves. That's not love. That's not family. That's parasitism disguised as blood relation. Today, 5 years later, my children are thriving. Emma is 13 now, a straight-A student who plays soccer and volunteers at the animal shelter. Tommy is 11, obsessed with astronomy and building things with his hands. Madison is 17, getting ready for college, confident and independent and completely unaware of how close she came to growing up without parents. They ask about their grandparents sometimes, especially around holidays, but the questions have become less frequent as the years have passed. Children are remarkably adaptable when they're in safe, stable environments. Jake and I are stronger than we've ever been. Going through something that traumatic together, protecting our family together, building a new life together, it bonds you in ways that normal marriages never experience. And me? I'm finally free. Free from crisis phone calls and guilt trips and the constant anxiety of waiting for the next family emergency that would somehow become my responsibility to solve. Free from people who claim to love me while actively working to destroy me. Some people will tell you that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that you should forgive and forget because they're your parents. Those people have never had their children used as human shields in a drug trafficking operation. I learned that family isn't about DNA or shared last names or holiday traditions. Family is about people who protect you, support you, love you without conditions or ulterior motives. My real family is Jake, Emma, Tommy, Madison, Maria, and Carlos. They're the people who would sacrifice for me, not sacrifice me. As for my parents, they're strangers now. Dangerous strangers who happen to share some of my genetic material, but strangers nonetheless. They chose drugs and money over their daughter and grandchildren. They chose selfishness over sacrifice. They chose to be criminals over being grandparents. Those were their choices. And my choice was to protect my family from them. I don't regret it for a second. So let me ask you this. When someone shows you who they really are, when they demonstrate that they're willing to destroy you to save themselves, when they prove that their love comes with conditions that could cost you everything, what are you going to choose? Are you going to keep trying to earn love from people who see you as expendable? Or are you going to protect yourself and the people who truly matter? The choice is yours. But I can tell you from experience, choosing yourself, choosing your real family, choosing safety over sentiment, that's not selfish. That's survival. And sometimes, survival looks like saying goodbye to people you once thought you couldn't live without, only to discover that living without them is the best decision you ever made.